One by one, prominent Republican politicians in the US are lining up to take on Joe Biden in the race for president. But first, they must get past the Republican frontrunner, Donald Trump. And as we mentioned at the top of the hour, Trump's former vice president, Mike Pence, is getting in the race today. He's making a formal announcement in about half an hour. And this is the first time in modern history that a former VP has challenged his old boss. And just minutes ago, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum tossed his hat in the ring. He's barely known outside his home state and is certainly far back in the polls. Pence and Burgum bring the size of the GOP field to 10 candidates. But some observers argue that a large field helps Trump's odds of winning the nomination by dividing the anti-Trump vote. And it's unclear that there are enough anti-Trump Republican voters to stop the former president anyway. Not only is he leading in the polls, but a recent CBS News poll asked Republican voters what they want from a candidate. And the qualities most important, they seem to align very closely with issues preached by Donald Trump, like opposing so-called woke or PC ideas and making liberals angry. Well, a majority even say they want a candidate who says Trump won the 2020 election. Well, time now for the exchange. I'm joined now by former Republican governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan. And it is worth noting that his name was tossed around as a potential presidential candidate, but he chose not to run because he feared it would divide the anti-Trump vote further. Good to have you with us, Governor.
Well, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
So you chose not to run in the presidential race because of this crowded primary and the fear that it will split the anti-Trump vote further. And you did say that there are several competent Republican leaders who have the potential to step up and lead, but the stakes are too high for me to risk being part of another multi-car pileup that could potentially help Mr. Trump recapture the nomination. Can you explain that further?
Sure. Well, it's what happened in 2016 when, Donald Trump lost. He only got 25-30% of the primary vote in many of the early states, but there were 17 people running. And so the rest of it was divided up in very tiny slices. And look, I think everybody has the right to run if they really believe that they have a chance to win the nomination and they think they have what it takes to be president. We don't want a coronation. But I think a lot of people want to move on from Donald Trump. But we've got to decide on a candidate that we think can do that, as opposed to splitting it, as you mentioned, potentially 10 people in the race. And what we see now is Donald Trump with over 50% of that primary vote as of today, and the rest of the folks pretty much all down there with very little traction in single digits. And so I think I do have a lot of friends in the race and a couple more getting in today. There are 5, I think, current or former governors, including Mike Pence and Doug Burgum today, Chris Christie yesterday. I think a lot of them have great abilities, but I'm not sure who's going to rise up out of that pack and be the one to challenge Donald Trump. There's a solid chunk of about 30% of the people in the Republican primary who will vote for Donald Trump no matter what. There's about 30% that won't vote for him no matter what. And there are about 30% that are willing to consider alternatives, but they haven't decided on who that's going to be. And we have another year to decide that.
And you tweeted about your support for someone you called your friend, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who you said delivers a hell of a knockout punch. He's run before. He didn't become the Republican candidate. Trump beat him at that. Do you believe he has a better chance this time round?
Well, he's a good friend, as is Mike Pence and Doug Burgum, and I tweeted about all of them and congratulate them on getting in the race. And they've all got strengths and they've all got weaknesses. And, I think that Governor Christie certainly got what it takes to take it to Donald Trump, which I think is important. I think he's a guy that can really take it to him in a debate if Donald Trump gets on a debate stage. At this point, we don't know if that's going to happen. But Look, I think it's just far too early to decide. At this point, in any election, a year away from the primaries, we have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, the conventional wisdom is usually wrong.
You did also tweet about other candidates, including former Vice President Mike Pence and also Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's very much aligned with Trump on policy. What will it take for a Republican candidate to get your endorsement?
Well, I'm gonna I see how things play out. Look, it really depends on how people perform out there in the field. Some people just, we don't know what it's going to be like. We don't know the positions they're going to take. We don't know if they're going to be able to connect with the voters, and we don't have to decide that until next spring. So it's going to take a lot. I'm going to try to make sure that there are people out there that can help us move the party back to a more traditional Republican Party, to a more Reagan-esque party, and away from Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans that currently are kind of the ones in control. I think it's very important for our party to get back to winning again and appealing with a broader, more positive message that reaches more people.
It's kind of interesting you say that, because when you look at the polls of people who are most likely to vote in the GOP primary, they want Trump. We've got CNN polls, CBS, YouGov polls. I want to bring up the CNN poll first, which shows that Republican-leaning voters or Republican voters want Trump with 53%. The Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, comes in at second with just 26%, and then it's a huge drop to Vice President Mike Pence with 6%. Chris Christie just 2%. What does that tell you? And at this point in time, should someone drop out?
Well, at this point in time, we don't really have any idea. If you look at 2016, and this point in time, everyone thought that Governor Scott Walker and Governor Jeb Bush were going to be the next president, and Donald Trump was below 1%. So, you know, a year is an eternity in American politics, and things are going to change dramatically. But, you know, you pointed out Governor DeSantis, he's trying to go directly after the MAGA base and to out-Trump Trump, and that's a hard sell. That's hard to do. So I think other candidates are going to come at it from a different direction. Chris Christie seems to want to hit Donald Trump directly, and others are trying to find a way to appeal to those people that supported Donald Trump but are willing to consider moving in a different direction.
Governor, I want to bring up another poll by CBS and YouGov, who asked likely Republican primary voters what they want in a Republican candidate. And they say they prefer a president who challenges woke or PC ideas, who opposes gun restrictions, who makes liberals angry and says that Trump won in 2020. So these are all far-right ideals, right? How does a more moderate candidate cut through that?
Well, that's the most challenging thing, and it's what I've been trying to focus on for the past couple of years. I left the office in the bluest state and the most heavily Democratic state in America with a 77% approval rating, and I thought I would make a pretty good general election candidate with an ability to appeal across party lines. However, making it through that Republican primary is a very difficult challenge, and it's two entirely different subsets of people. Yeah. So there are about 68% of the people in America who do not want Donald Trump or Joe Biden to be president or to be the nominees. However, only about 20-some% of the most far right or far left actually show up to vote in these primary elections. And so sometimes we nominate the person who's the furthest to the right or the furthest to the left, and they don't really appeal to the vast majority of swing voters in the middle. And this year, this election cycle, I don't think it's ever been a more extreme case of that, where the issues that the people are focusing on to win the nomination are really turning off wide swaths of people that are going to decide the general election in November.
Yeah, I wonder if the election system of voting needs to change, and also what your political future is.
Well, I'm not sure what my future is, other than I'm not giving up either on the Republican Party. I think the best days of America are still ahead, and we are very divided. And I know that's of concern to people around the world and our allies, but we're not as divided as you would think. I mean, I think there's more that unites us, and we've just got to find a way to kind of break through this angry, toxic politics that we're seeing, and find a way to bring people together around a common set of values and a kind of a more positive, hopeful vision of America.
We can only hope. Former Governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, good to get you on the show. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, we have an update just coming into us about a story we told you about earlier. Pope Francis is now out of surgery. The Vatican says the 3-hour operation took place without complications. The Pope underwent abdominal surgery to repair a hernia. He is expected to stay in hospital in Rome for the next few days. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with much more. Stay with us. You're watching CNN.